This is going to be a fantastic conversation. The panel title is Why Governments Need to Invest in Robotics and AI, but we are going to be talking about, frankly, a lot more than that is the goal. My goal as the moderator is to facilitate the conversation between these three fantastic panelists, and I'm going to try to keep it quick. So we keep moving, we cover a lot of ground. For quick introductions, my name is Alex. I am the CEO of Futurism.com. I run a media company that writes about breakthrough science and technology. To my left, we have Carol Reiley. Carol is the co-founder and president of Drive AI, where they now have over 100 employees and have raised $77 million, is that correct? That's correct. To build autonomous vehicles using deep learning. Her previous work includes underwater and industrial robotics at Santa Clara University, space satellites at Lockheed Martin, people detection at GE Research, and clinical development engineering at Intuitive Surgical. Next to her, we have Dr. Anima Anandkumar. She is a principal scientist at Amazon AI and Bren professor at Caltech. At Amazon, she builds large-scale machine learning solutions and enables them on cloud infrastructure. Her research interests are in the areas of large-scale machine learning, non-convex optimization, and high-dimensional statistics. And finally, all the way to the left, we have Jurgen Schmidhuber. Jurgen has a great introduction here. Since age 15, Jurgen's main goal has been to build a self-improving AI smarter than himself and then retire. He is often called the father of modern AI. His lab's deep learning neural networks, such as LSTM, have revolutionized machine learning and are now on over 3 billion smartphones and used billions of times per day, including for Facebook's automatic translation, Google's speech recognition, Apple Siri, Amazon's Alexa, and more. He is a recipient of numerous awards and president of the company Nascence, which aims to build the world's first practical general-purpose artificial intelligence. Thank you all for being here. To jump right into it, the first topic to discuss, relevant to the topic at hand, is AI regulation. So the UAE has appointed the world's first Minister of AI, Omar, who is right here. Thank you for joining us. This question is directed towards Anima. Anima, it seems like many governments have taken a reactive approach towards this idea of governing AI and robotics. Do you think that more governments, like perhaps the UAE, should take a proactive approach to this topic?
I mean, indeed, this is a very forward-thinking move to appoint a Ministry of AI that can be tasked to have an entire vision of AI for the country, right? I mean, currently, it's so imperative to educate the citizens about, first of all, what AI is, where it is currently, and where it is heading next. And the next aspect is how do citizens interact with the current AI systems and make them better? And ultimately, we'll have a section of the population that can contribute to strong AI research. And we need to globalize and democratize AI. And I think the role of the government is crucial. One bit of caution, though, is AI is not just a vertical, but also horizontal, right? So every other ministry should also have AI embedded in it, and so there needs to be this coordination because every domain, whether it's agriculture, transportation, finance, everything should have an AI-enabled thinking and vision. And so we also need this horizontal coordination across the ministries.
Absolutely, and I think it's always good to make sure that regulation doesn't stunt development of AI, right, and prevent us from actually accomplishing those goals much more quickly. Carol, I know you have been at the forefront of autonomous driving for quite some time, and you've had to kind of navigate those regulatory complexities quite a bit. And I'm sure you've seen a lot of different regulatory environments, from Singapore to the US to perhaps here in Dubai. What do you think about that? What have you seen firsthand from that perspective?
So I think it's anytime there's new technology, it's interesting to get this balance between the creativity of the people actually developing the tech and the government support. And I think the role of government is extremely important, and they have to work together to create a framework for people to thrive and rules to put in place. I come from a background also before self-driving cars in medical devices and underwater robotics and space robotics, and you see similar patterns in each field where innovation first starts, and it's kind of like the Wild West in the beginning. And as products get released, that's where the governing bodies come in play. There are collaborations with governments directly, as well as governing bodies that are local to each location. So there is FEV, for instance, for the US. There is IEEE standards across. So I think it varies on local needs of the people as well.
And you're based in California, is that correct?
We're based, yeah, US-based.
How has that been navigating the regulatory environment in California?
You know, I think the US is very innovative in terms of technology, but in terms of governments, is a fast follower. And we look to other international locations that are able to move much more quickly and can also spend time with the innovators. So even though a lot of the innovation happens in the United States, we do look for a lot of international deployments.
Got it. And Jurgen, you are intending to build the world's first AGI. That seems like a concept that should have some kind of regulatory approach to it. What do you think about this?
I'm opposed to it. However, it is clear that the government has a role, and this role is to educate people such that they can become informed decision makers and understand the problems that are coming with systems, for example, that not only slavishly imitate humans, but also invent their own goals. And systems like that exist in our labs already. So you have artificial intelligences that have a desire to invent their own experiments and their own goals to better understand how the world works and which problems you can solve in it, and to become a more and more general problem solver. And it is important, in my point of view, that people understand that things like that exist and that they are going to come and that they are going to become really important. And the knowledge that is needed to make an informed discussion about that should be somehow spread. And there the government has a role, as always, in education. I don't have the obvious answer to that. I think no scientist and no government has a clear answer to the coming problems of this type. But only by educating people to understand these questions, you will be able to make better and better decisions as you are collecting experience with this, with such systems. So education is key.
And what do you think about the idea of governments taking a proactive approach to investing in AI and robotics, instead of simply regulating it?
That makes a lot of sense. So what is the near-term future in AI? I believe what we currently see a lot is pattern recognition, which is working really nicely, speech recognition on your smartphone really well, face recognition, machine translation, but all of this is kind of passive, and the next wave, an even bigger wave, is going to be machines that are getting smart, that have sensors, that can do all kinds of things that currently only people can do. So at the moment, the following scenario does not work yet. The thing which is going to come is show and tell robotics, where you have a robot that is sitting next to you and you teach it like a kid. Like a kid to do certain things, like you say, okay, let's assemble this smartphone, and you have to take this block here and the screwdriver and the screw, and you have to screw it in like this. And you don't touch the robot, you just let it show, let it see what you're doing, and you say, and now you have to hold it like, not like this, not like this, like this. And then it optimizes further and does it faster than you can do it, and so on. And then you make 1 million copies, and it's going to change a lot of professions. So this is coming. It doesn't work yet, because there is this one field which is working really nicely, which is pattern recognition, passive pattern recognition. There's a separate field, which is robotics, which is traditional industrial robotics, also working well, but only in very confined settings. And these fields want to marry, and this is what's going to come next. And a government that today invests into this combination and this marriage is going to be more successful than other governments that just let other outside players do that for them.
So, yeah, good.
Can I add one thing? You know, I loved your question about, you know, how can governments help? And I do think that one way to help is definitely monetary. But I think a second one, especially with any type of innovative tech, is to help loosen the constraints of the problem. And for instance, in the field of self-driving cars, we don't necessarily need our cars to drive exactly like humans do, and the constraints and rules that were made for humans may not be the most optimal when you are writing rules and regulations for self-driving cars. And what I think the role of government and fast-thinking governments are ones that actually don't necessarily need to understand all the complications behind the technology, but are able to understand what are the constraints and challenges and maybe help loosen those to start so that the technology can get out there as soon as possible.
And I want to just add one more point, like a much more basic thing is extreme digitization, right? Every aspect, starting from the government itself to all the data collection processes, making them much more seamless, because only then the AI can have impact in domains. So thinking about every domain, how we can digitize and have seamless data collection, and think about different kinds of data that needs to be collected to have an impact.
Certainly, and thinking through the government's role in kind of this process around the innovation within AI and robotics, obviously one question that comes to everybody's mind is job displacement. Are millions of people going to lose their jobs? We all have seen the Oxford study that states 40% of jobs are at risk by 2025. And I think The Economist had a big headline on their magazine that said that no government is prepared. And so that kind of begs the question, one, will there be mass job displacement? Do you agree with this idea? And then how does the government kind of fit into that equation?
I mean, yeah, so to me, it's, there'll be different kinds of jobs for humans, right? It's already happening. The more mundane jobs are getting automated, and ultimately AI will replace most of these repetitive jobs. But that, to me, is a great opportunity for even more human creativity and taking us even further in terms of progress. For all these centuries, like we built human societies to essentially limit our creativity and, essentially work in a way as machines, right? So that will go away and there'll be more opportunities. I mean, we need some support mechanisms. Maybe it's universal basic income, definitely universal healthcare to ensure everybody, has these basic standards of living. But that's the start. So to me, like AI will give us a lot more opportunities to be human, to be more creative.
But Jurgen, I think you and I spoke yesterday, and you said that you think new jobs will be created, and there will not be this kind of mass period of unemployment. Would you agree with that?
We can try to look at the past, what happened then. Many decades ago, people predicted losses of jobs through industrial robots. And it is true. Back then, there were factories, car factories, and they were full of humans assembling cars. And today, the same car factory has hundreds of robots and maybe 3 guys watching the humans. But those countries that have lots of robots per million capita, all of them have really low unemployment rates, like Japan, Korea, Germany, which why? Because all kinds of new jobs were created, invented, which back then didn't even exist and which nobody was able to predict. And it seems that Homo ludens, the playing man, is all the time creating new jobs that are not existentially necessary for the survival of the species, like YouTube blogger or whatever. and nevertheless, there's a market for these jobs. Yeah. And although today most people are here in this room are in luxury jobs, like myself, I'm a scientist, not existentially necessary. And there was a time when 60% were in farming. Now this has totally reversed, and maybe 1% is in farming. And still we have massive employment, not unemployment. So Homo ludens, the playing man, is going to solve the problem because he doesn't want to be unemployed, so he invents useless jobs.
And as for... building on that, as for the jobs that are going to be replaced, it seems like many of those jobs are male-oriented jobs. They're targeted towards men. So that kind of begs the question, how does that change current societal structures? And is the AI sexist in that sense? Carol, what do you think?
You have opinions?
Well, for decades, I have pointed out that AIs really like to replace male jobs. At some point, the fastest man or the fastest human or the fastest person was a male runner, and and he had made a lot of money with that, although the fastest machines are much faster than the best runner. And the best chess player was a man, but he was replaced. And lots of male jobs got replaced. Why? Because most of these male skills are tunnel vision skills. They can do one thing really well, but you know, if you ask a man, if a man ties his shoelaces and you ask him a question, he has to interrupt his activity. Females are general problem solvers in comparison, and they can do many things at the same time and still keep an eye on the kids and so on. And this is much harder to replace. So tunnel vision skills are easily replaced. Female skills are really hard to replace.
Carol, what do you think about this?
To add to that, because I do like the empowerment that Jurgen had brought up there. But I think one realization is that, I mean, women only started to work a century ago. I mean, men have had jobs much longer. So that is one thing. So I hope in the future, even without AI, that men and women both, there's an even blend of the types of jobs that they do have. But I do think that someone brought up a great point about bias in AI. And I do think that people have to be very mindful. It's not really the AI that is evil, but it's a reflection of human society and how we think. That is why I believe also that the trolley problem becomes such a talked about topic. Like we hear about it panel after panel, but it's something so human.
Do you want to elaborate on the trolley problem so everybody knows what we're talking about?
Yeah.
This is very interesting.
Yeah, so one of the most commonly asked questions for any sort of AI scientist or robotics scientist is about the trolley problem, which is if a trolley has to make a decision to kill 5 children or kill an elderly person, how does it make the decision, like the ethical decision of which one to choose? And you know, it's a very philosophical question about human nature, and there's been lots of debates. I think we even had a lively breakfast debate about it. And you know, after a lot of debate, there's no clear right or wrong answer. And I think it's something that is so, it's a reflection on human judgment, human values, like the last speaker was talking about, and how do you rank what people value, and that changes from person to person, society to society.
I mean, we've heard a bunch of different solutions to that problem, right? Like I've heard a blockchain-based reputation system, which is pretty out there, but then you had the simple solution of, you know, you kind of just fill out a questionnaire and you opt in or you opt out to one option.
Yeah, because I think, I mean, instead of holding up and putting this on each individual AI company, or, you know, there's not going to be a global solution right now, but you know, you might put the onus on if you were to take a Lyft, Grab, Taxify, whatever, a self-driving vehicle. Maybe each individual person has to fill out a pretty painful questionnaire before they start about what they would choose to do, because some people might say, save me at all costs, and other people might be thinking differently. And I think maybe it's up to each individual person to decide to start.
Anima, what do you think about this?
I mean, so to go back to the effect of gender roles, right, in society, I mean, like women started working only about a century ago because there was no home automation. I mean, it was a full-time job. Women were working very hard even before that, right? But they couldn't work outside because it was just a lot of work just within the home. And so automation already solved this, and AI will now you know, make it for everybody to express themselves better, more creatively, and that will mean, you know, men can also express their emotional sides more and, you know, take on jobs that's not based on their physical strength or on these tunnel vision tasks, but much more about creativity. So I think it will benefit everybody. But I think one danger is if we train our current AI systems without thinking about how we are taking all this data, right? These current data will have biases. I mean, if you just take like images from the web, I mean, they're only like images of a certain age or race, right? Like the most popular data set for training face recognition is a celebrity data set, and that's extremely imbalanced compared to the general population. So we need to be careful about how we want to not have the current biases in our society affect the AI systems, because that can, in fact, amplify it furthermore.
That was a great response.
I see two kind of solutions for that. One is, you know, you build up your team to be very diverse, or then the other alternative is that you actually have to plan out test cases earlier and get that to be very representative and talk to a lot of different types of people.
Do you think there's a diversity problem in AI?
Absolutely.
Yes.
Yeah. Except for not this panel. This panel is actually pretty well organized.
I'm happy to hear that.
I mean, I wish the whole AI field would have the same proportion as this panel, right? And the same. So I'm very happy about this. But in general, so we have efforts like Women in Machine Learning, you know, that when I started, it was barely about 50 or 60 women in the audience. And now when I go to NIPS, which is the most popular machine learning conference, there are about 1,000 women. So, you know, this, I mean, the AI field has taken off exponentially, but it's good to see many more women. And for the first time, there was Black in AI workshop within the NIPS conference. So we need a lot more effort to diversify and democratize AI. So in my current role at Amazon AI, I look at how cloud can remove these barriers. So I was in Africa for a Pan-African summit on deep learning, and there were stories about how NVIDIA donated the GPUs, but there were so frequent electricity failures that, you know, it couldn't be used. And so then cloud is one way how people all around the world can train their own machine learning models, because they need to bring in their local data, their local cultural values and objectives, and we need the infrastructure to be available for everybody to do that.
And you mentioned the NIPS conference, and I'll come back to that in a minute. But you know, one thing we saw in the news recently was a quote from Sundar Pichai, who said that AI is more profound than electricity or fire. Mm-hmm. And that was all you saw in the headlines. And he actually said a little bit more than that if you dive deeper. He says, but fire kills people too. We've learned to harness fire for the benefits of humanity, but we've had to overcome its downsides. Mm-hmm. And so, you know, kind of diving further into that quote and what the future of AI looks like, especially when you introduce a concept like AGI into the mix. And so last year at NIPS, actually maybe it was a month ago, Elon Musk said he expects that we will have AGI in the next 7 or 8 years. Anima, what do you think about that?
Frankly, I think it'll be a lot longer than that.
So you totally disagree?
Yes.
Okay,
yes,
totally disagree.
I mean, so to me, like, you know, like, okay, let's look at the current models, right? So human intelligence, it took us about 4 billion years starting from, you know, the single-cell organisms. And in that case, it was evolution that was pretty dumb. You know, it was just brute force. And if you think about all the computational power that evolution required, that's a lot more than what the current technology does. But then you could argue that we don't have to be so dumb in our search for AGI. You know, we can design more intelligent mechanisms, and certainly smart human beings like Jurgen designed, like LSTM, that's much better in being able to do speech recognition than a completely unstructured system, right? And that's where all the current research is headed on how we can design better neural network architectures that can, you know, even predict better patterns from data. But again, like going back to what Jurgen was saying earlier, the current systems are more focused on extracting these statistical patterns.
Yeah.
But we need to move to mechanisms that can think out of the box, like have this creativity to say, like, I can have now a higher layer abstraction. To give you an example, you know, when I started working on machine learning research, I was trying to think about new algorithms, right? And then I realized that the current algorithms are crunching all the data into 2 dimensions, because matrices are something that we know, that's everybody learns in their undergraduate engineering studies. And we have libraries that can crunch up matrices very well. And that's what the current deep learning systems use. But then, like, I started asking, why do we just limit to that? You know, we can go to higher dimensions, and I started thinking about tensor algebra. Tensor algebra is even connected to something as remote as quantum systems, and you know, that was Richard Feynman used it in his equation. So there's all these wide-ranging implications that, as a human being, I could like kind of think out of the box, right? I had like this aha moment saying, oh, why matrices? Let's go to more dimensions. Yeah. So we need computers, that not only can think out of the box, but realize why it's meaningful and rapidly make the connections to something bigger.
I remember Jurgen yesterday at breakfast. You said something. You had a very strong opinion on this. You said that you believe the world's first general-purpose AI will consist of only 10 lines of code, and that you believe it will be so simple that it will be impossible to keep it under wraps. Is that right?
That's true, yeah. So even if...
you say it with so much confidence. You're like, yeah, obviously.
Well, because in the beginning of the millennium, we already had something which is which is an optimal universal problem solver, which is optimal in a certain theoretical sense, which isn't practical. That's why we are still in business. But it is extremely simple, and it has something which is called an asymptotically optimal way of solving all kinds of problems. And every computational problem, as long as it's large enough, is solved in an optimal way, and it ignores certain constant additive constants that you shouldn't ignore in practical applications. That's the reason why we still are doing other things. But at least in principle, you see that problem solving is simple. Optimal problem solving seems to be simple. What we still have to do is figure out how to get all these puzzle pieces which we already have and put them together such that the entire puzzle emerges. But I think, just like LSTM is just 5 lines of pseudocode, it's nothing, you know, really simple, but really useful for many things. We need another 5 lines, and then we will have the full thing. And then it is true, even if our company should come up with that, there's no way of keeping it under wraps, because even Swiss banking secrets aren't safe any longer. And so it's going to leak one way or another, and millions of different people are going to use it for millions of different utility functions, and they are going to try to optimize millions of different objective functions in a way that leads to a lot of goal conflicts between these different objective functions. And it's going to be very, very unpredictable, and it's going to be a very democratic thing too, because it's not going to be one company controlling everything. No, it's going to be millions of different guys playing a role there.
You said unpredictable. We've got a little over 3 minutes left. Let's jump into predictions, right? Everybody loves predictions. We can sit up here and talk for an hour, but at the end of the day, the headline of the article is going to be, person X said Y by 2025. You know, and those are always fun. They're interesting. Last year, Elon said most cars will be autonomous in the next 10 years, or I believe something like that. And so let's make some predictions. Let's have fun. And Jurgen, I know you have some very interesting ones that we'll end with. But Carol, let's talk about maybe like the 10 to 25 year time frame. What predictions do you have?
Yeah, so I believe we're right at the start of this revolution that's happening right now. And in the next 10 to 25 years, I imagine just more natural ways of communication, so it'd be more seamless. Right now, it's very explicit. You know, you tell your robot to go get a beer, you click the input into a mouse or your iPhone. And I think in the future, it'll start to be more natural, where there's nonverbal communication. It starts to understand what we are thinking and doing. So
BCI?
Yes, and moving BCI. More and more towards that direction.
Interesting. Any other predictions?
Self-driving cars, flying cars, all of that.
How long? How long do you think until most cars are self-driving?
I mean, we're already at the start of small batches of self-driving cars. People just need to start seeing it in a very real, concrete way before we do mass-scale manufacturing. The problem is not manufacturing. It's no one solved the problem yet.
So how long do you think it's going to be until most cars on the streets will be autonomous?
For most cars on the street, I see it as a much longer game, because driving is so local. Driving here in Dubai is very different from China, is different than the US. So I think we don't have global Wi-Fi yet. We don't have global internet. This is a much longer time span of a few decades.
Anima, let's go 25 to 50. It allows for some flexibility. What do you think?
Yeah. So I think by then we would have seen like self-driving cars to be much more almost universal.
Yeah.
I think we'll need that much time to get us to every part of the world. But more generally, by then AI would be very much embedded in every complex system, right? Whether it's internet, transportation systems, smart grids, monitoring systems. So every aspect it will be controlled with AI and have AI, systems embedded. And at the same time, like with human lives, we'll first start with these, right now it's a smartphone interface, like you're swiping screens, and soon, now it's voice, like Alexa, we are speaking to it, and it's still very much in the infancy, and over time, the intent recognition, like understanding what the human wants from this AI system, right, it will get much better at recognizing and understanding that. And ultimately, there'll be brain-machine interfaces where, even before you think, the AI system already knows what you want, right? So I think that'll be more than 50 years, but towards the end of that, we'll be getting there.
All right, Jurgen, we've got about maybe a minute to hear your theory of everything. Where is all this going? What's going on? What is this?
Because both of you mentioned self-driving cars. Of course, self-driving cars have existed for a long time, and 20 years ago, Dickmann's, the famous pioneer of self-driving cars, he had them in traffic on the highway, going 180 kilometers an hour, passing other cars and whatever. And they were not good enough for mass deployment, but it's going to scale. But let's zoom back a little bit. Let's look at the history of the universe from a human perspective. It started 13.8 billion years ago. And now we take this time interval and we divide it by a factor of 1,000. We come out 13 million years ago when the first hominids emerged, your ancestors and mine. And we divide that interval again by 1,000, and we come out 13,000 years ago with the invention of agriculture and domestication of animals and everything. Beginnings of civilization, and everything accelerated dramatically. Now, the first guy who had agriculture was almost the same guy who had spacecraft. All of civilization is just 1/1,000,000th of the age of the universe. It's just a flash in the history of the world. And now, soon we are going to have real AIs that really deserve the name. And then maybe we can divide again this time interval by 1,000, and it will take another 13 years maybe until everything is going to change beyond recognition. Well, what is going to happen once these AIs are really superhuman? And I have no doubt in my mind that they are going to be superhuman in every important way. Of course, they are going to realize what we have realized a long time ago, which is almost all resources are not in our biosphere. They are out there in space. And so, of course, there will be an expanding AI bubble or sphere, and it will be a complex, super complex ecology of all kinds of competing and collaborating AIs, trillions of different species, and it's going to expand. And within a few billions or tens of billions of years, it's going to colonize and transform the entire universe. Now let's look. Let me try to stretch your mind a little bit. Let's look ahead. Let's multiply by a factor of 1,000 the current age of the universe. Let's look ahead to the point in the future where it's going to be 13,000 billion years old. Then they will look back and they will say, almost immediately after the Big Bang, only 13.8 billion years later, the universe started to become intelligent. And it's a privilege for us to live at a moment in time where we can see the beginnings of that and can contribute something to it.
Thank you.